CAYACast episode live. Hold on to me.
Numbering them.
3, 2, 1.
Yes, Queen!
Hello, Kaya family, and welcome to today's episode of the CAYACast. We have some familiar faces. We have Lorcan, me, Gina, Bradley, and Mila, and some new faces here to talk about a very exciting topic with us. We have Kelly and Liv. So stay tuned for some interesting discussions.
About vaginas.
So Kelly, how did you become involved in the Vaginarian project?
So the Vaginarian project is a brainchild of many people's ideas. Basically, after the last Africa burn in 2019, our friends came out and we were like, we want to build the Eye of Syra and something like that. And it was around about September when we had the huge gender-based violent movement, and there was tons of stuff going on in South Africa, and I was actually abroad in Sri Lanka. And I came back with this huge idea and desire to connect with my community and build something out in Africa Burn that was flowery and feminine. And it was exactly kind of like this, where you're sitting around a table with your intimate group of friends and talking about an idea and a concept. And it started like that. I come from a production management background, and I didn't know how to do it, but I knew that we could do it. So there was a group of people who were engineers, designers, artists, and we wanted to build something that meant something. And yeah, it started from there. So we want something interactive. We want something that makes a statement, that something artistically meant, something to the world, and specifically towards that time that we were living in. So, yeah.
If I can throw in a question, like, what is that for you? When you say, like, I wanted to represent my community and be about my community, who is that community? Who, obviously we don't want to like limit that too much, but who for you is who are you trying to really speak to as a part of that community?
Well, I think it was mainly the community that we were specifically speaking in within our small, white, feminist little group. And it's not to say that was who our limit was. That was where we were coming from, as a group of women who are strong and loud and talk about really intimate details about their vaginas and their sex lives, and often actually made their partners a bit uncomfortable with how far we go in terms of openly discussing these intimate details. And the vagina is such a multi-dimensional, intersectional piece of discussion. It's social, it's political, it's economic, it's got so many facets to it that it really just was something that spoke so proudly and I don't know what the right word is, like proudly,
and just on so many layers, like
it felt
all ages, all races, like everyone was welcome.
Exactly. I'm somebody who is queer identifying, and I feel very connected. Even though I'm androgynous, I feel very connected to my feminine body, and I think that's the point about even in discussing about what the actual lips were looking like. Every vagina is a unique snowflake, right? And that's just the point, is that every single person has a different experience on the earth. And without one another, we are nothing without each other. So it's good to bring us all, if in theory we could do that, into a space that we can connect and share stories.
Yeah. And you said earlier you wanted the piece to make a statement. So for our listeners who know nothing about the Vaginarian project, what is that statement? What did you want people to gain from the experience of being in the structure and seeing it?
Well, to fit that into one sentence has been the constant struggle of this project. But basically, the kind of all-encompassing word was rebirth. And I think that's very fitting, because it's the rebirth of our dialogue, of the way that we interact with one another, between masculine and feminine, the way we speak to ourselves even. So it's rebirthing the right word of dialogue, the narrative and the conversation and the way we speak around a certain topic. Often the vaginas, or vagina, pussy, whatever you want to call it. We've got so many connotations around that one word. If we can start to pull apart and really get down to, you know, the meaningful conversations around it, that would be fantastic. And that was also part of the artwork, so interactive, somewhere that could hold space for people, and somewhere that somebody could also see and reflect on what they'd had in the downstairs temple, so to speak, was one of the main aims.
I'm listening, I'm just fiddling, but you guys continue.
Cool. So Liv, how did you become involved in the project?
So basically, I got involved in the Vaginarian project through my partner, Jordan. He knew some of the queens just from around Cape Town, and I actually only joined at the beginning of the year, but I've just graduated, so I had all this extra energy, and also my work personally lies very much in the divine feminine realm. So I was just like so excited from the get-go, and I just absolutely enjoyed working with so many amazing queens, pre-building, planning, like especially those 2 months leading up to Africa Burn were all encompassing in so many ways. Our social life was taken over. Like the main two girls, Kelly and Ivana, they basically set aside their jobs for this project, and they pulled out all the stops by managing a group of, I think we're like 22 people, most of which are women, but there was also a select few men, which was quite amazing, because they were literally just there to serve us and to serve the purpose of creating the beautiful vagina. Yeah.
I mean, how do you, there's obviously costs involved in a project like this, which, and it's important to talk about that. Where did the funding come from to build it, to get it there? Like, how did that all work?
Sure.
And how can people support it next year is basically my question.
Oh, it's fantastic. Well, that was partly one of my favorite parts of the roles, actually, that I found the easiest, in inverted commas. It's a 2.5-year project that this baby has taken. As I said, we started in August 2019, and we did a pitch to Africa Burn where it started in one place, and it was this airplane that was maybe this size, and it ended up like sort of a Boeing size, which was quite fantastical. So initially, I actually only thought it would cost around 80,000 Rand to build, which I think we could have done if we hadn't, added all the colors and the lights and all these exciting facets, because like I said, the project got bigger and more ideas, and the meaning and the space underneath became more important. So it got bigger and bigger. So we got given a grant from Africa Burn. As far as I remember, that was initially 40,000. And then we actually didn't think after COVID we'd get any more money from them. This year they actually gave us a further 20,000.
Okay. And
you name it, we did it. We did a Indiegogo, I think, or a Kickstarter. We had parties, we had thrift stores, or thrift market, which was really, really cool. Actually, it was all of us taking our clothes that, I think we had 5 or 10 items we brought in, and we just ended up buying half of each other's stuff. But, it was quite a fantastic event, and the whole process has been the most incredible learning experience. Not to say without its challenges, but exactly, we figured out what worked and what didn't necessarily. Let's say the parties were great to interact and talk about the pieces. Is it where we made the most money? Absolutely not. So it was very many sources of revenue, as well as investors, I guess, friends, family, people from overseas, and even within our country who could just afford a little bit more than your 100 Rand. But ultimately, everybody's 100 Rand, 50 Rand there contributed to what was around 180,000 Rand. And I know it sounds crazy, and it is crazy, but there was these huge unexpected costs of having to store our project for 2 years because we were in the middle of it. And Cyril came on and told us, we got to get out and find somewhere to store this for what we thought was then going to be a year.
3,
so,
yeah.
3 weeks initially.
absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
I was going to say I didn't get the chance to go to Bern this year, sadly, and it was one of the like creations I would have loved to have seen. And because I didn't get to go, I was wondering how the people that like passed this creation, like how they ended up interacting with it, because I think the point is vaginas are stigmatized, and just to see one in its glory, obviously in a more abstract form, like you would think, well, not you would think, but people that go to Africa Burn or are open to that kind of environment might be a bit more liberal or forward thinking.
Receptive.
Yeah, but like possibly not. So were there any interesting experiences of how people like moved through that space?
Yeah, definitely.
Elaborate.
for you.
The stage is yours.
This is the good shit.
Yeah,
it-
truly.
I think first and foremost, the Vag was definitely a landmark because she was very close to the Binnekrung and close to the welcome road, like the entry road of the player. And I think initially there were some people that were a little bit confused as to why. Like there was also women that just came up and were like, why? And I think as the festival progressed and there were more activations, so we had the temple on the inside, which was a women's only space, which was also quite interesting to see how men would come and be curious and want to enter, but then the women would be like, no, consent, like all of these type of small things. And then, people started relaxing more into the idea of the vag and the slide on top. And I think at the end of the festival, there was kids sliding down on the laps of their mothers, and then they would be like, I'm born again, mom, like, and stuff
Bro,
like
it's only
that.
been 6 years. Relax.
I think that's so
Yeah.
beautiful because it's like the vagina's a place that's so much more than like just a sexual place. So like there's absolutely nothing wrong with like a mom and their kid like doing that. It's like a celebration of something so beautiful.
I
Yeah.
think that's one thing that really stood out to me was it created almost it's like a destigmatization of the vagina. It's a celebration, and it's a showcase of the fact that a vagina is so much more than just a thing for sexual pleasure or something that a baby comes out of. It's life in itself, which I think was it was
I'm crying.
Yeah.
God, yeah, it's the creation portal.
Will you stop working on you cry a lot in this chair.
Doesn't speak, just cries.
Oh,
But I did also just want to say that it was a massive, massive privilege to be able to see it in all its glory, and it really was quite the spectacle.
yeah, thank you so much.
Thank
That
you.
really, I think that's, for me, one of the most magical and special things to hear. And it was it was hard. It was really hard. I'm not going to lie. The building out in the desert was a little rougher than one actually expects. And for me, one of the most meaningful and special moments was on the Monday, and we were still finessing with the internal decor.
Yeah.
And by then, the guys who had been there since Tuesday were done, and I was lying inside in this beautiful velvety vagina, and I heard people start to arrive, and that sheer wonderment of like, is that a vagina? Like, I started to be like, sheesh, this is the point. It's the wonder.
This
It's
is
the
it.
excitement.
This is what it's all led up to.
Exactly that. It's, conversations around it. It's the humor. It's the seriousness. And I actually had I had great interactions of exactly sometimes lying inside the vag, and because it was this woman identifying space only, we had a sign outside, and it was always in our prep of like, how are you going to manage this? What are we going to do when somebody comes into the space or whatever? And a lot of anxiety around it. And as you said, became quite self-governed. And a lot of men, they read it. They were like,
maybe
kind
had
of
a peek
peered
inside,
but it definitely felt like some huge boundary and respect of space that was just really special and meaningful. And the one evening I was smoking a cigarette on the side, and this guy, whether meaning to or not, dropped his cigarette, and it rolled down the side, and his girlfriend was so pissed at him. Like she was speaking to him in Spanish, and eventually flicked him off and went down and fetched it. So it was just amazing to see exactly that, the kind of respect and fun and wonder that I personally wanted was felt and shared by all. So we're glad that you at least got to be there.
Yeah, no, it really was quite something special. I had a little slide down the vagina, which was a very special moment. Also got some nice photos and video of the vagina. So
yeah, you must share those with us.
Yeah, I will do once I get around to editing all the stuff. Yeah,
all the Africa burn stuff.
I find it really powerful that it was just a woman's space, specifically because I know the kind of audience that goes to Africa Burn, and I know it's a lot of men that would probably be interested in that. And I'm like you've said, there were men coming to check it out and kind of want to know what's going on. And I think it's important that this conversation eventually gets opened up to the masculine, but it has to, because of, you know, the complexities around it and how much emotion there is behind this topic, needing to have those spaces just for women. It's so important. I mean, just having men there present would have, I mean, from my perspective, I'm kind of phrasing this as a question, but would it have made a big difference in the sharings that were going on in the space? You know, women are needing right now a safe space to share, and oftentimes when men are present, those internal perspectives shift and change, whether you notice it or not. And I thought maybe from like a producer perspective, you guys could comment on that, seeing the woman go through that process.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to also say and add, like, you know, sex and gender is such a huge spectrum, right? Because even for us, when we were talking about it, it's like, what is a woman? Where do we end that bracket of who's allowed in this space or who's welcomed? So, you know, I'm still not sure how to answer that question. I think it was a question for a person to answer within themselves when they were at Africa Burn, if they felt like they identify as a woman, regardless of genitalia or anything, they were of course welcome. And I think, again, the outside was really nice in saying this is a lesson in consent. And as you said, it reflects of, we do need to have spaces, even men men, trans people, whichever brackets we want to put people in. When we put ourselves in these more refined and intimate spaces, I think it allows for a more intimate conversation that perhaps we wouldn't, that we wouldn't be able to share in a vulnerable sense with perhaps somebody of another gender or one that doesn't sit the same as ours. So there was a yoni, did I say that right? Yoni gazing workshop. Which I think, wouldn't necessarily have worked as intimately if there was a man in the space.
Will you explain what that workshop was about for our listeners?
And what a yoni is, just in case anyone doesn't know.
A yoni is a vagina. We're talking about vaginas.
The whole episode is going to be about vaginas. Anytime you don't know what a word means, it probably means
vagina.
Except binnenkring. Binnenkring is the inside.
The binnenkring is the street.
Well, I mean, like...
Well, you know.
Translation.
So a yoni is, I think it's like Asian, I'm not actually sure the origin of where it is, but it's kind of the spiritual description of the vagina. And we had a facilitator by the name of Jessica Fawn. You guys can go check out her Instagram. She does amazing work. And she had the yoni gazing workshop. I think I heard they were like 30 to 40 women in the temple. And they had a led ceremony where they would actually have a conversation with their yoni with a mirror. And
wow.
It was super powerful. Like, so many women were talking about it and in absolute tears about, just because of the catharsis that they experienced from that. And besides that, we also had a few yoga workshops, some meditation by Nikki Achenberg. No, sorry, Nikki. Her nickname is Dickie, funnily enough. Sorry that I messed up your surname there. Yeah, and then I also at the beginning of the week had a vagina drawing workshop. But then I just left the art supplies in the space, and I have about 81 vagina drawings, which I'm going to be displaying next week at our event. Just saying.
Yeah, let's get some promo.
That's the best part about the Vaginarium or the vaginas or the Yas Queens, whichever you guys know us by. We just Yas's Queen. We're constantly
you guys.
Yeah, that was us. We started the Yas's Queen.
I'd be sorry to interrupt, but I'd be like sitting at a burn or I'd be at a tent and I'd just hear like 20 people behind me be going, Yas Queen, Yas Queen, Yas Queen.
That's how we would locate one another.
Actually, I had a thought on this.
Absolutely,
that's surely a too like enticing term to use as like a call out, because you say it's like playing Marco Polo. You call out Yas Queen and like 20 other people that you're not connected to.
That's why it's Yas's Queen. It's the minor difference so that they can detect the real ones from the people who just jumping on the bandwagon.
It's a good way of bringing people in. You just start calling out Yas Queen. People are like, why
that's
are you
how the
that?
cult starts.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
tell us about this event where you're going to be displaying these vaginas.
Woo.
Okay, so that's going to be next week, Wednesday. You guys are all invited.
Which might have already happened.
Yeah, depending when this podcast comes out, it could have already happened.
We'll do our best. If it's happened, we'll post this clip as promo.
Yeah.
So
Wednesday I don't know what the date is. I'm sorry.
Next week, Wednesday.
I think it's the 16th. No.
17th.
17th.
18th, sorry. Because today's the 12th and it's 6 days from now.
Yeah. Okay. So it's the 18th of May, next week, Wednesday. It's our official Vaginarium Decompression. It's going to be upstairs on the second floor at Gallery 111.
Loop Street. 111 Loop Street.
/111 Loop Street. And I'm going to be displaying the yonis that were created in the Vaginarium at Bern. And we will be serving tea, and there will be a preview of the documentary that's being made about the Vaginarium. It's uncut scenes. And then we're going to have an art station again and just some chilled vibes. I put up all of my work from last year. It's going to be my like kind of farewell as well, because I'm flying the weekend after. So yeah, that's
Amazing.
it.
Where are you going? I'm interrupting the focus of the podcast. Where are you going?
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
Spreading the love of the vag.
Yeah, I'm taking Vag worldwide, guys.
Let's go.
Taking the vag on tour, yeah.
So I'm moving back to Europe for a bit, to Germany, and I've been manning the Vaginarium Instagram page, and there are some ladies that messaged us and were like, hey, we do a festival called Hedone just outside of Berlin, and we would love to connect with you and maybe collaborate. And then I was like, okay, I'm the only one of the Vag crew that's there, and I have no plan whatsoever. So yeah, I definitely want to bring Vaginarium to Berlin. So that's going to be my first project when I arrive.
Worldwide Vag.
Amazing.
Incredible.
Wow.
Let's go.
Okay, so yeah, we'll
we'll post that clip before the podcast comes out so that people can know about.
I also had a follow-up question when you...
Go for it.
Are you sure?
Yeah, of course.
Nope, I forgot. Go first.
So hard. I have so many questions circulating.
I think of them and then I'm like, wait, I have to hold it and hold and wait for the next person.
I wanted to sort of just build on or add on to the sort of I suppose the not male exclusion, but the sort of vagina focus of the Vaginarium. And I think that was a very important thing, because I feel like the inclusion of males into that space would make it almost like, as you guys said, it would make it uncomfortable. It wouldn't make it a really safe space for people to share freely. Because I feel like if penises were allowed into the vagina, there's a male reaction to being uncomfortable, which is that you have to own the space and you have to be the kind of like the macho voice, the like almost like a facilitator kind of role. And I feel like if males had been included, that would have happened, and the freedom to really tap into yourself and to really get in touch with yourself and come to terms with yourself wouldn't have been possible for all the women who were in the Vaginarium. So I think that was a very good move on your behalf.
Although you did note earlier that you could still, it was sort of about how you identified though.
Yeah, so that may have not,
definitely.
That may not have been the best way of describing it.
Men were welcome, but just on the slide.
Yeah.
So they were allowed to slide
which was very
into
fun.
and out of the vagina, which metaphorically speaking is quite hilarious. And I think a lot of people also, kind of caught up on that. Yeah. But so I feel like the slide was more like the vagina, like everyone had access in a way, and then inside was like the womb, which is like,
I mean,
sure.
you know.
Yeah, on that I did a little bit of producing research, and the word yoni is a Sanskrit word, which directly translated means source or womb. It became meaning womb. But like the original word itself means sauce.
Not S-A-U-C.
I thought you meant like pasta sauce.
Not pasta sauce. Origin.
We got the sauce.
The source of life. And that's also what I often like to say as well, is like the pussy is the portal of creation. Like that was kind of my theme behind my workshop as well for the yoni drawing.
Yeah. How we make life.
I mean, talking about just vaginas in general and this conversation that is so important. I mean, I know personally what I think those important conversations and how they desperately need developing. And I know sort of what directions I would see those needing development in. But for you guys with this experience, what are some of the like big conversations that were being had that have a lot of importance for people to know about?
Sure. I don't think the thing is as diverse as it is, I don't think exactly we actually even hit the tip of the number of conversations we could have had. One of the really fantastical ones that Nikki facilitated was healing through trauma, which was really, really a difficult workshop to sit in, but I really did appreciate it. And I think to add to what we're talking about men or even trans people, I think there was so much more we could have done, and we were constantly working and picking and finessing the art. And how do you allow for the conversations, but also allow for people to have fun? Because not that the workshops weren't fun, but we had to close the slide when these workshops were happening during the day as well, so that people's, nice intimate space weren't, with people. Yeah, exactly. And if I had to do it all over again, I think I would we would have liked to have, the veggies would have loved to have more conversations even with men or trans people, and even have a diagram of saying this is literally where the clitoris is.
That was the one thing we still wanted to do.
Which is really funny that we never actually then did it. Workshops on pleasure. I think we could have deepened and I personally, I thought it was so ironic, but working in the desert after several days and, no proper bathrooms out there, I actually got thrush. It was amazing on day 2 of Africa Burn, which was, I just thought exactly come on, I'm out in the desert here.
I'm out here celebrating the vagina and this is what you do to me.
How often do you have a conversation with a guy about thrush, but it happened and, it just became part of the experience. So
I feel like
the answer to that is we should be doing it more.
Yes.
I think that's also just the great part about the project is it started in one place and it was airplane that got bigger and bigger, and I think
it's still going to get bigger.
Exactly. On a trajectory
of growing
conversation, and I think it encouraged and inspired people there, and hopefully inspired people to carry on these conversations and have more workshops, have more events, and that's what's really cool about our group is we come from different spaces, but we're all kind of these natural entertainers and producers. And I don't think that this project is ended. Somebody said, the ashes are settled, but through the ashes,
a phoenix will rise.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
yeah, that is what happens over and over and over again for all eternity.
yeah.
I think the pleasure talk would have been if there was something to extend the inclusion of who's who's allowed into the vagina. I think a pleasure talk would have been a really good utilization of that, because I mean,
maybe even like opening up for couples.
Like I said it like,
that sums it up.
I speak for all men when I say that it's necessary, because can't be going around just pump squirting. But
Thanks for that.
Okay.
I hope everyone enjoyed that image.
so now I've crossed the line.
True, right?
Been talking about
very
vaginas
true.
for half an hour, and that's what's crossed the line.
Yeah.
I mean, this is something that I've been thinking about a lot recently, actually, for some reason. It just pops into my subconscious. But I saw a diagram of what a vagina looks like when it's turned on versus when it's not turned on. And my immediate thought was, why the fuck isn't this being taught in school?
Yeah.
Why do men not know the
sex
difference?
ed.
It's as obvious as a soft or hard penis.
Yeah.
Like,
Absolutely.
it really is.
Like, I would
and most
say-
men aren't looking at the vagina they're going into before entering. Why is this a thing?
I would say like a lot of vagina owners don't even know that difference, to be honest.
Yeah. And a lot of vagina owners don't
Well, because
look at their vaginas enough.
Yeah,
This is something my
absolutely.
mom did with me when I was very young. When I first started getting a period, my mom told me to take a mirror and look at my vagina and get to know her. And it was traumatizing because I was like, 13? And my mom was telling me to look at my vagina and I'd never looked at it before. But once you break that that barrier and start getting to know yourself, makes it a lot easier for women when having these kinds of conversations with their partners, with men, with, whoever your partner, whatever name they call themselves.
Yeah.
Because I think that's really the crux of the issue. Besides, I mean, sexual education in school is ridiculous and so outdated and so sad. Actually, that we haven't made any progress in that area. But that's why there are spaces like this that come out, because as women get older and they have more of these uncomfortable experiences and they need to work through that trauma and get to know themselves again, you need that support from other people to be able to do that. So I think it's really, really beautiful.
Absolutely.
And also on the clitoris thing, I saw a video where someone was walking around the streets with a diagram of a vagina, asking men to point out the clitoris. Literally none of them got it right. And I was
Viral TikTok
so
embarrassment.
concerned.
It was very concerning.
So
Showing
concerning.
off mum's thing.
Yeah, but like what you were saying with like when you looked at your vagina when you were like 13, your mom was like having that discussion with you. Why should it be that something that's a part of our body feels private from us?
Yeah.
And that's like, I
Even
think,
from ourselves.
like really needs to change in the whole world. Nobody should feel like that. It shouldn't be like, a taboo thing. It's actually part of your body.
Yeah.
I mean, I grew
I think
up with...
that comes from like so many layers of patriarchal social conditioning. Sorry, I just had to jump in there because as a society, we reject the vagina. We reject period blood. You go to school, you can't talk about your period. Like if you just bleed on your skirt a little bit, you have to go home immediately. Like
It's like
all of these layers.
sweep it under the carpet. It
If
doesn't
you-
exist.
Yes,
it's not
exactly.
It's
happening.
embarrassing.
Yeah.
For what?
I know.
Yes.
I yesterday was at my other job and I
Whoa.
said
Hustle,
to...
hustle.
Cheating on us?
I'm actually cheating on that job with you guys.
We're the new chick.
New and improved. And I literally just said, I'm bleeding. I didn't even say period or anything. And my, a female superior to me was like, whoa, TMI. I was like, excuse me? Like, why? Why is that TMI? Like,
What is too much information for you? Like what? Like I'm saying, what to her? Like what would constitute too
Well,
much.
yes, okay.
Obviously not a lot.
To be fair, it is it was a work environment and it was at a job.
No, but you didn't even
But
specify
This is
where
a
the
work
blood is coming
environment
from.
and you're at a
Yeah.
job.
Yeah, but this is
Totally okay.
Well, if you
different.
think about it, like if somebody comes in and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so hungover, like I can barely work today. That's like a personal detail about your life. You're
But that's
consuming
socially
drugs
acceptable.
and you're coming in and you're telling me how now your work is impaired because you were consuming drugs, whereas you're naturally just bleeding.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
just
that's
like
a
how we think
natural
about
thing.
it.
If
It's got a headache.
It happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like-
and I mean, God, I've had so many of those bizarre experiences, and
Yeah.
fortunately for me, I grew up with very, I don't want to say liberal, but like
Progressive parents.
progressive parents. There we go. Thank you, Lorcan.
Hippie.
He has them as well. The Waldorf kids.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, before my mom even did that mirror thing with me, my dad was asking me when I was about 12 or 13 if I was masturbating,
Yeah.
which was
fascinating.
extremely traumatizing. But to be able to have an open conversation like that with
Just
my
to
father,
destigmatize it. Yeah.
who completely, was literally just checking in with me that I'm getting to know my body, that I'm learning what I like and what I want. He was trying to ensure that in my like sexual development, I wasn't ever put in a position where I'm doing something I don't want to be doing or don't like or
yeah.
haven't
that's-
learned about myself.
Yeah, and that's why having a relationship with your vagina is so important, because how are you going to enforce boundaries or say, hey, I don't like this, if you yourself haven't explored that for yourself?
Yeah.
And I think that's also not
And-
a
and
reason
pleasure
why,
as
but
well.
like I think that's why some people may struggle to enforce those boundaries, because it's such a taboo topic in so many households, especially if you think about the South African context, and how women are just at such a great disadvantage, especially women of color, where all of the sexual exploration is kind of like shrouded in darkness, especially in the younger years. I think that's also why the Vaginarium was of such a pivotal importance, because of the high gender-based violence and femicide rates here in South Africa. In South Africa, we have one of the highest rape assault statistics in the world.
Yeah.
And I think that's a point that I wanted to bring across with this project as well, not to focus on the negative side of it, but just to actually make it okay to celebrate the vagina and to be like, hey, this is actually a wonderful thing. It's not just something that is there to be abused.
Yeah. And we need to wrap up soon. I just want to say one more thing before the last thing. Is that, we did like for it to become a celebratory space and something of enjoyment. But I think, and trigger warning if anybody doesn't want to carry on listening at this point.
A bit late now.
No, well, I'm about not about vaginas.
I was going to say, like,
if you have a problem and need a trigger warning for a vagina, like don't click on the episode.
Yeah, no one will be listening.
But
to
like,
this if they have a problem with
especially
that.
because of the prevalence of sexual assault in South Africa, that there needs to be a discussion in our context in South Africa, because there's lots of like resources like worldwide. I've listened to lots of podcasts where they talk about things like yoni workshops and yoni gazing, but I just don't feel like it's as broadly facilitated here.
Yeah.
But it's necessary so that so many women who have vaginas can overcome that trauma, because I don't think at this point there's a framework that we know how to do that like people, and this is depending on what you believe, like how your body works, but like that your vagina can hold so much of that trauma, and how to release that. Like it could just help so many women move forward, and start like celebrating that again.
And to just say that exactly, it's not about waiting for others to facilitate these workshops, these conversations. It's me, it's you, it's them, it's talking to your friends and connecting. And there is so much power in our connections. So
I think just like a thing that I was thinking throughout this whole conversation is what I think is so cool about like the platform or the brand of the Vaginarium, aside from the installation itself, is it's what I see that the like duality of the like inner womb and the outer vagina is like there's a space for like sitting and connecting over shared experience, which is the inside, and that's important because you need to feel like comfortable and feel like you relate to people to have some of those conversations. Like having men in that space just would on one level just detract from the relatability of the whole of the space. You know, we can't interact with it in the same way, and it's important. But then to have another side of it, the like outside, where it's about sharing that shared experience with other people, because it's only as like more and more people become understanding of those conversations that are had in that kind of, obviously not in as intimate detail, but understanding of the shared experience as it's shared with people. That's how we, you know, that's how we grow societally, and the way that we think is creating safe spaces for people to share with other people who understand them, and then using the like collective strength of that to bring that more into public conversation, which I think is like what we're doing here, which is really
creating
cool.
a space.
And that's really fun.
And just one last point that I sorry.
No, go ahead.
Whoever gets the last word here is what I want to know. There's lots of strong voices here. Yeah.
One last point that I wanted to make, you know, linking to the sexual assault conversation, is a lot of the time women, well, I know I don't want to put this on women, but there can be situations in consensual relationships, consensual sexual relationships, where women still don't feel comfortable to say what they want or talk about their own needs, you know, and that safe space between men and women, I think, is very important. And having women have a space to share, like you said, have shared experiences and talk relatably, and then to have men just listen to that. So, for example, starting a podcast where those conversations are had between women, and they are for men to listen and learn, and maybe learn to start asking the right questions. You know, when you're having sex with a woman or in a sexual situation, to check in, you know, to ask and make sure that woman is enjoying herself, because a lot of the time we end up not
and their
abusing
partner
ourselves,
as well, to be honest, because the thing is, exactly, this is a conversation for a longer thing, but
part two,
you know, even like a man, like the way that they've been watching programming, they can be having sex sometimes in the way that they've seen online, and it's not actually pleasurable for them. So, you know,
I mean, one major thing that's come up recently for me in a lot of conversations with my female friends is performative sex, and not actually enjoying a sexual experience, but only thinking about your the male perspective and
or your partner's needs ahead of your own.
Performing as in like moaning so loudly and throwing your head back and doing this whole like display of pleasure when you're not actually feeling any of those things. So getting into a space where you are so present in your own body and you know exactly what you like and don't like, and that conversation can be had in conjunction with those experiences, those sexual experiences and sexual relationships that we have. And I mean, it's definitely a longer conversation and something we could potentially have you guys on to chat about more.
Yeah,
definitely
something we could chat about next week at the event.
Definitely.
We could even do a part 2, a follow-up.
I just thought it was worth mentioning.
Part 2 and get people to engage personally.
On stories, that would be cool.
Endless
we just have to do it before next week, before I leave.
We can do. We're saying we could do it at the event.
Do a like little live discussion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'd like that. That'd be sick.
Yes.
Cool. Well, that's us next Wednesday.
Can't wait to talk about vaginas more.
I mean,
exactly.
I know that the Vaginarium, the project, the idea, it's not going anywhere. But to wrap up, I just wanted to ask, what did it feel like after, since conceptualizing this project,
2.5 years in the making,
growing, you know, it being stunted because of COVID, watching that baby burn.
Wow.
Briefly.
I'm getting goosebumps just thinking of it.
You know, what did that feel like?
Well, the running joke on the pre-build was like, how are you feeling? Tired. So sure. on that actual night, I mean, it was the most incredible relief.
Catharsis.
Cathartic, yeah.
And that is why they burn those sculptures. Hey, it's like
release.
And it was also almost like a climax because like we got these pyro guys, these two crazy motherfuckers.
Pyro guys tend to be.
They literally were walking around with a suitcase full of explosives and they were so excited and they were like, no, we're going to put fireworks on the clit and we're going to do this and this and this, and we were like, oh my goodness, just go and then we were the only ones that actually had fireworks and explosions and stuff. And it was so really effective. Wow. But
that
I
feels
think
kind of apt.
Thanks, Eric.
You know?
I was about to say that seems about right.
All orgasms.
And then
exactly, it's like totally like the female orgasm. We wanted it to be like this, but it ended up like that. We had a Catherine wheel and but exactly the way that it burned, just the flames were on one side and sparkles on the other. It was actually supposed to be a completely different plan, but that's just Africa burn as well.
And that's how it went. There's no script to
before we properly wrap up, because I want you to properly wrap up, I just want to talk about yes, this whole conversation has been around vaginas, and I know it's short. Is that it's as important, if not more important from certain perspectives for men and people who identify as men
about
to
vaginas.
Be engaging with this podcast, like and subscribe. But the conversation, more than anything, because men also experience performance anxiety in sex because they haven't had conversations around vaginas enough and they don't understand them.
Or about dicks.
Talk about genitals. And we all need to just be more open to having these kinds of conversations and engaging with it. And this is, there's so much to be learned from hearing other people's perspectives, and
and shame,
if you want to be good at sex, talk about it.
Shame dies on exposure.
Absolutely.
That's literally the only way that you can make something dark come to light. You have to talk about it, and then you actually realize whoa, I'm not alone.
And talk to actual women.
To sum it all up,
hear it straight from the horse's mouth.
Ask your girlfriend about her vagina. Ask her,
have that uncomfortable conversation. What does your vagina like? What doesn't your vagina like? What does your vagina actually do?
What's her name?
Have a look.
What is her name?
Have a look.
Don't be going and sticking things in there. Actually have a good look and a good
just
chat.
observe.
Just observe.
And on that note,
and more cunnilingus.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Just in general for everyone.
Just in general, just blanket statement. More cunnilingus. Head for all.
Head for all.
And on that note.
Thank
you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Don't forget to do the intro.
This was a really wonderful
thank you so much, guys.
Experience. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And the Vaginarian.